The glow of the forge flickers against the darkened workshop as the blacksmith's hammer strikes molten metal, each blow shaping not just steel but history itself. This scene played out thousands of times across the ancient world, from the smoky foundries of Bronze Age Anatolia to the legendary sword makers of medieval Damascus. But here's the unsettling truth. Somewhere along the way, we lost secrets so advanced they could redefine modern industry. Techniques that transformed ordinary metal into objects of unimaginable strength, flexibility, and beauty now lie buried in the dust of forgotten scrolls and abandoned ruins. What if I told you that the metallurgical mastery of our ancestors surpasses some of today's methods? That civilization's long-gone achieved feats we still struggle to replicate, even with 21st century technology. This isn't just about rediscovering old tools, it's about uncovering a hidden chapter of human ingenuity. Imagine a world where swords could bend without breaking, where alloys resisted corrosion for centuries, where craftsmen manipulated metal at a molecular level without a single computer. These weren't myths, they were real, tangible achievements perfected over generations and then vanished. From the mysterious strength of Viking Ulfberht blades to the dazzling patterns of Damascus steel, these lost techniques whisper tantalizing clues about what ancient metalworkers truly knew. How did they do it, and why did their knowledge disappear? That's the journey we're embarking on today. Together, we'll unearth 25 forgotten metallurgical secrets, each a testament to the brilliance of civilizations that shaped our world. You'll witness the eerie precision of Bronze Age casting methods that defied primitive tools, the alchemical recipes for alloys stronger than anything in their time, and the cryptic processes medieval smiths guarded like state secrets. This isn't just a history lesson, it's a detective story, piecing together fragments of knowledge that could revolutionize how we think about metal. So step into the forge of the past with me. The fire's still burning and the answers are waiting in the embers. The first forgotten technique takes us into the heart of ancient India and Syria, where metalworkers mastered an alchemy so precise it bordered on magic Wootz steel. Unlike ordinary iron, this metal wasn't just strong. It was virtually indestructible, capable of holding an edge so sharp it could slice through silk as it fell through the air. But the true marvel wasn't just its strength, it was the mesmerizing patterns rippling across its surface like flowing water frozen in metal. These weren't decorative flourishes, they were the fingerprints of a process so advanced we've spent centuries trying to reverse engineer it. The secret began with a special ore mined only in select regions, rich in trace elements like vanadium and tungsten, but raw material alone wasn't enough. Smiths would seal the ore in clay crucibles along with carefully selected organic matter leaves, wood, even animal bones, creating a chemical reaction modern scientists call carburization. For days, these sealed vessels would bake in charcoal furnaces, reaching temperatures that purified the metal while infusing it with carbon in a way no European smith could replicate. The result, a blade that was flexible yet unbreakable, with a crystalline structure so refined it could withstand impacts that would shatter ordinary steel. Here's where the mystery deepens. Even today, with our electron microscopes and industrial forges, we struggle to recreate true Wootz steel. Modern replicas often lack the distinctive water-patterned surface, and their durability falls short of artifacts pulled from thousand-year-old ruins. Some researchers suspect the missing ingredient isn't just technique, it's time. Ancient smiths may have used slow cooling methods we can't replicate in our fast-paced world, allowing the metal's internal structure to align in ways we still don't fully understand. The irony is stark. We've sent probes to Mars and split the atom, yet we can't quite match the craftsmanship of a workshop lit by nothing but firelight. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Wootz steel isn't just about metal, it's about patience, about knowledge passed hand to hand in ways no textbook can capture. Every failed modern attempt whispers the same truth: Some secrets aren't just forgotten, they're waiting to be truly understood. While the smiths of Damascus were perfecting Wootz steel half a world away in Han Dynasty China, another revolution in metallurgy was unfolding, one that would produce weapons so formidable they helped forge an empire. Picture this: strips of wrought iron packed tightly in clay boxes alongside organic materials like leaves and animal hides, then baked in furnaces at precise temperatures for days. What emerged wasn't just metal, it was a layered masterpiece of carbon-rich steel, its strength carefully engineered through a process we now call blister steel production. This wasn't brute force blacksmithing. It was chemistry in motion, a dance of heat and carbon that predated Europe's famous pattern welding by nearly 1,000 years. The Han Dynasty's secret lay in their meticulous control of carbon diffusion. By alternating layers of iron with carbon sources, often crushed bones or plant matter, they created a sandwich of materials that transformed under heat. As temperatures rose, carbon atoms migrated from the organic layers into the iron, turning soft metal into hard steel. But the real genius was in the folding. Unlike simple single-layer steel, these craftsmen would hammer the heated strips, folding them back onto themselves dozens of times. Each fold multiplied the layers exponentially. 2 became 4, 4 became 8, until a single sword might contain thousands of microscopically thin steel sheets fused together. The result: blades that combine the flexibility of iron with the hardness of high-carbon steel, capable of withstanding brutal combat without snapping or dulling. Archaeologists examining 2,000-year-old Han swords have found something astonishing. Some specimens still show visible layer lines under microscopes, evidence of folding techniques so refined they rival modern metallography. Yet what's even more remarkable is how these ancient smiths manipulated the process. By varying the carbon content in different sections of the blade, they could create weapons with a soft, shock-absorbing core and razor-sharp edges. A concept modern engineers call differential heat treatment, though the Han craftsmen had no thermometers or textbooks to guide them. They achieved this through instinct, observation, and generations of closely guarded trial and error. The legacy of this technique echoes far beyond ancient battlefields. When European knights were still relying on brittle, single-alloy swords, Chinese warriors had weapons that could bend 45 degrees and spring back straight, a feat modern metallurgists only achieved consistently with 20th-century spring steels. Some surviving Han blades show minimal corrosion despite millennia underground, their layered structure acting as a natural barrier against rust. It makes you wonder, how many other breakthroughs did these artisans discover that we've yet to rediscover? Their workshops were laboratories without microscopes, their furnaces precision instruments measured not in degrees but in the color of glowing embers. Perhaps the most humbling realization isn't that they lacked our technology, it's that they didn't need it. Their understanding of material behavior was so intimate, so refined through hands-on experience, that they achieved results we'd struggle to replicate even with digital temperature controls and gas-regulated furnaces. The blister steel method wasn't just technical prowess, it was a philosophy of metal, a testament to what happens when human ingenuity meets elemental forces with patience and precision. As we'll see next, this interplay between art and science would surface again in the most unexpected of places, not on battlefields, but in the delicate workshops of Viking jewelry makers where metal became canvas. Across the savannas of West Africa, where the midday sun turns clay to stone and rivers to dust, artists of the Benin kingdom perfected a metallurgical miracle, casting bronze so lifelike it seemed to breathe. This was no crude hammering of hot metal, but something far more extraordinary: the lost wax method, a process so precise it could capture the flutter of a monarch's eyelashes or the tension in a warrior's coiled muscles. Imagine a sculptor carving the finest details, every bead, every feather, every sinew, not in clay or stone, but in beeswax. Then, layer by layer, they'd envelop this fragile masterpiece in clay, creating a mold so thick it could withstand the fury of molten bronze. Here's where the magic happened. When fired, the wax inside would melt away, not a single drop left behind, leaving a hollow space exactly mirroring the original sculpture. Then came the bronze, poured like liquid sunlight into the void, filling every groove the wax had occupied. Once cooled, the clay mold was shattered away, revealing metal that had memorized every stroke of the artist's hand. The result, sculptures with textures so intricate modern engineers using 3D printers still marvel at their precision. A single Benin bronze could contain thousands of individually defined details, chainmail links thinner than thread, facial expressions frozen in mid-speech, even the wrinkles on a leopard's nose. But the true brilliance lay in what this technique represented, a democratization of artistry. Unlike European bronze casting of the same era, which required massive workshops and noble patrons, Benin's method allowed individual artisans to work on smaller scales. A single artist could create a dozen wax originals, each unique, then produce multiple casts from a single mold. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was early mass production with an artisan's soul intact. Why then don't we see this technique celebrated alongside Renaissance masterpieces? The answer lies in the brutal suppression of African knowledge during colonial conquests. When British forces looted Benin City in 1897, they didn't just steal thousands of bronzes, they dismantled the guilds that preserved these techniques for generations. Oral traditions were silenced, workshops destroyed, and master artisans scattered. For decades, Western museums displayed these pieces as primitive art, never acknowledging the sophisticated science behind their creation. Recent archaeological discoveries reveal an even more startling truth. Benin metalworkers may have been using a proprietary alloy blend, mixing local copper deposits with imported metals to achieve a unique golden hue and exceptional durability. Some bronzes show trace elements suggesting trade networks stretching as far as Egypt and India, proof that this wasn't an isolated tradition, but part of a vast intercontinental dialogue of metallurgical knowledge. The tragedy isn't just that these techniques were nearly erased, it's that we're still piecing together their full complexity. Modern artisans attempting to recreate Benin bronzes often struggle with the clay mixtures. The original recipes included secret additives that prevented cracking during firing. Even today, some surviving bronzes show surface patterns indicating the wax was applied in specific temperature-controlled stages, a level of control we assumed impossible without modern thermostats. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Benin's lost wax method isn't about metal at all, but about memory. These sculptures weren't just art, they were libraries encoding centuries of technical knowledge in their curves and hollows. When we look at them now, we're not just seeing beauty, we're glimpsing the ghost of a system that elevated craftsmanship to the level of sacred science. And somewhere in that glow of ancient bronze, there are still secrets waiting to be read. Beneath the waves of the Mediterranean, hidden in plain sight, lies one of Rome's most astonishing engineering secrets, concrete that doesn't just endure but actively heals itself. While modern bridges and highways crumble after decades, 2,000-year-old Roman piers still stand defiant against crashing waves, their surfaces bearing scars that somehow sealed shut centuries ago. The difference, a recipe so ingenious it turns destruction into regeneration. At the heart of this ancient alchemy was a bold gamble. Instead of fighting seawater, Roman engineers weaponized it. They mixed lime with volcanic ash from the Pozzuoli region, creating a compound that reacted explosively when exposed to salt water. Modern scientists call this process pozzolanic reaction, but the Romans knew it simply as the magic that made their harbors indestructible. When cracks formed, as they inevitably do, seawater would seep in, triggering a chemical cascade. The water would dissolve pockets of unused lime, releasing calcium-rich fluids that traveled into fissures and crystallized, effectively knitting the concrete back together. It wasn't just repair, it was rebirth, with each storm making the material stronger than before. What's truly humbling is how this ancient method outshines our modern equivalents. Today's concrete relies on steel reinforcements that rust, expand, and eventually betray the structures they're meant to support. Roman concrete had no such weakness. Microscopic analysis of ancient samples reveals a labyrinthine microstructure interlocking mineral crystals that distribute stress like a spiderweb, preventing catastrophic failures. Recent MIT studies using X-ray spectroscopy made a startling discovery. The Roman formula included chunks of quicklime that remained dormant until cracks exposed them to moisture, creating a perpetual repair system. The implications are staggering. Imagine seawalls that fortify themselves against rising tides, or underground pipes that seal their own leaks. Yet despite our advanced tools, we still can't perfectly replicate the process. The missing ingredient might be time itself. Roman concrete gains strength over centuries, while modern construction demands quick results. There's poetry in that contrast. An empire built for eternity used materials that improved with age, while our disposable world struggles with materials designed to meet deadlines. Perhaps the deepest lesson isn't in the chemistry, but in the philosophy. Roman engineers didn't see concrete as a static product, but as a living collaboration between human ingenuity and natural forces. They worked with corrosion rather than against it, turned weaknesses into strengths, and built not just for their generation, but for ones they'd never meet. As waves still lap against those ancient piers, they whisper a challenge to our modern pride. Sometimes the future is hidden in the past. High in the mountains of feudal Japan, where winter winds howled through pine forests, master smiths performed a sacred alchemy trance, forming black iron sand into the soul of a samurai sword. This wasn't just smelting, it was a 3-day fire ritual inside massive clay furnaces called Tatara, where every flicker of flame and shift in smoke carried meaning. Picture a structure taller than a man, its walls hand-built from river clay mixed with straw, glowing like a dragon's maw as temperatures soared past 2,000 degrees. Inside, layers of iron sand and charcoal alternated like the pages of some ancient recipe, slowly metamorphosing into Tamahagane steel, the rarest, purest metal reserved for blades that would become legends. The secret wasn't just in the materials, but in the dance of control and chaos. Unlike modern blast furnaces that maintain steady heat, Tatara masters deliberately orchestrated temperature fluctuations by reading the furnace's breath. At dusk, they'd watch flames transition from orange to pale yellow, signaling the critical moment to add more charcoal. A blue tinge at the furnace's base meant the iron was reducing properly. A sudden white glow warned of dangerous oxidation. This was metallurgy as living artsmiths listening to cracks in the clay, smelling changes in the smoke, even tasting the air for traces of sulfur. Some accounts describe masters scattering ash into the wind to judge airflow, their entire bodies acting as sensors attuned to the furnace's rhythm. What emerged after 72 relentless hours was no uniform ingot, but a heterogeneous bloom of steel with zones of varying carbon content, a deliberate mosaic of hard and soft metals. The highest carbon Tamahagane, gleaming like crushed stars, would become a sword's razor edge, while lower carbon steel formed the resilient spine. But here's what modern factories still struggle to replicate: these variations weren't accidents. They were engineered through precise stacking of materials and masterful manipulation of furnace drafts. Iron sand from the Shimane coast, rich in titanium, was positioned to create natural alloy zones that resisted corrosion, an innovation materials scientists only patented in the 20th century as microalloying. The Tatara process defied efficiency. For every ton of iron sand, only a few kilograms of premium Tamahagane were harvested, the rest becoming lower-grade steel or brittle cast iron. Yet this apparent wastefulness held genius. Contemporary metallurgists discovered that the iron sand's slow reduction, a byproduct of the furnace's uneven heat, produced exceptionally pure steel with fewer impurities than electric arc furnaces. The clay walls themselves acted as natural filters, absorbing harmful elements like phosphorus. Perhaps most haunting is how much knowledge was never written down. Apprentices spent decades learning to read the Tatara's moods, their education written in blistered hands and soot-stained memories. When Japan industrialized in the late 19th century, hundreds of these furnace masters took their secrets to the grave. Today, only one traditional Tatara team still operates annually under government preservation, a living museum piece struggling to keep the flame alive. Modern attempts to recreate Tamahagane often fail to capture its ethereal quality. Lab tests show historical samurai swords contain nanowires of cementite ultra-hard iron carbides aligned like grain in wood that modern versions lack. Some scholars believe the missing ingredient was time itself. The Tatara's slow cycles allowed crystalline structures to form that can't be rushed. There's a profound lesson in that furnace's glow. Some forms of knowledge resist industrialization, thriving only in the space between art and obsession, where fire becomes a language and metal remembers the hands that shaped it. Buried in the peat bogs of Scandinavia and pulled from the graves of long-dead warriors, a handful of swords bear a name that still sends shivers down historians' spines: Ulfberht. These weren't just weapons, they were marvels of metallurgy so advanced they defy everything we thought we knew about Viking technology. Picture a 9th century Norse raider gripping a blade that could flex like a willow branch yet hold an edge sharper than a surgeon's scalpel, while Frankish and Anglo-Saxon swords shattered in combat. Ulfberht blades sang through armor and bone alike. What made these swords extraordinary wasn't their craftsmanship alone, but their steel. Modern spectrographic analysis reveals something startling. Ulfberht steel contains carbon concentrations between 0.6 and 0.8%, an almost perfect balance of hardness and flexibility that European forgers wouldn't consistently achieve for another 1,000 years. Even more baffling, the metal shows virtually no slag inclusions, those tiny impurities that weaken most medieval steel. This was crucible steel of near-mythical purity, a material that shouldn't have existed in Viking Age Scandinavia. The trail of clues leads far east. Chemical fingerprints in the steel match ores from the Pamir Mountains and Hindu Kush, thousands of miles from Viking settlements. Some blades even contain traces of vanadium and tungsten, elements found primarily in Central Asian deposits. This wasn't local iron hacked from bogs. This was premium imported steel, transported along trade routes so secret their existence was forgotten for centuries. 3 prevailing theories attempt to solve this medieval mystery. First, the Volga trade route, Norse merchants navigating river systems deep into the Abbasid Caliphate, trading furs and slaves for ingots of high-carbon steel. Second, the Fur Road hypothesis, Viking outposts in Russia acting as middlemen, funneling steel from the Silk Road's northern branches. But the most tantalizing theory involves the Khazar Khaganate, a semi-nomadic empire controlling the Caucasus metallurgical heartland. Jewish merchants from Khazaria could have smuggled crucible steel north, bypassing Christian and Muslim trade restrictions. The real shock comes when you compare Ulfberhts to their contemporaries. While most Viking swords were pattern-welded, layering soft and hard iron to mimic better steel, Ulfberhts were monolithic. Their homogeneous structure suggests smiths received pre-made steel ingots, implying an industrial-scale crucible steel industry somewhere in the medieval East that Europe knew nothing about. Metallurgists at the British Museum made a chilling discovery. Some Ulfberhts show manganese alloying, a technique not documented in Europe until the 1800s. This wasn't just superior steel, it was alien technology for its time. Yet the greatest enigma isn't how these swords reached Scandinavia, but why the knowledge behind them vanished. By the 12th century, Ulfberht ceased appearing in graves, and Europe regressed to inferior steel for centuries. Some argue the Mongol invasions shattered the Central Asian trade networks that supplied the steel. Others suspect Norse smiths never truly understood the material they worked with, like scavengers trying to reverse engineer a microchip. The few surviving Ulfberts became heirlooms, then legends, then ghosts of a forgotten golden age of metallurgy. Today, when a historian holds an Ulfberht, they're not just grasping a weapon, they're touching a frozen moment when global trade and forgotten sciences collided. The steel still gleams with a peculiar luster untarnished by time, as if daring us to unravel its secrets. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of these swords isn't about lost techniques, but about how easily interconnected knowledge can fracture, and how the brightest flames of innovation sometimes leave only cold ashes behind. Deep in the golden chambers of pharaonic workshops, where torches cast wavering shadows on hieroglyph-covered walls, Egypt's master metallurgists performed what looked like alchemy, transforming dull, impure gold into divine sunlight metal. For centuries, historians dismissed their methods as crude superstition, interpreting tomb paintings of priests heating gold with salt and brick dust as mere ritual. Then in 2018, a breakthrough in archaeological chemistry revealed the terrifying truth. Those ancient artisans had unlocked an electrochemical purification process so advanced it predated modern refining techniques by 3 millennia. The key lay in an unassuming mixture they called sweating gold. Artisans would combine raw gold nuggets, often contaminated with silver and copper, with common salt and crushed ceramic bricks, sealing everything in a clay crucible. When heated to just below gold's melting point, something extraordinary happened. The salt reacted with silver impurities to form silver chloride, while copper oxidized into brittle scum. But here's the genius: the crushed brick acted like a molecular sponge, its porous surface attracting and trapping these impurities as gases rose through the mixture. What remained was gold of staggering purity, up to 99.9% without ever fully melting the metal. Modern scientists now recognize this as an early form of cementation, a process not formally documented until the Renaissance. Laboratory reconstructions using exact replicas of Egyptian crucibles proved the method's shocking efficiency. A single heating cycle could remove over 80% of silver contaminants. Even more impressively, the temperature control was precise enough to avoid gold loss through volatilization, a problem modern refineries still grapple with. Those seemingly random hieroglyphs depicting furnace temperatures, they weren't approximations. Recent experiments show they correspond to exact thermal thresholds where silver chlorides form but gold remains stable. The implications rewrite our understanding of ancient technology. While medieval European alchemists wasted centuries trying to transmute base metals into gold, Egyptian metallurgists had already perfected reverse alchemy, the removal of everything that wasn't gold. Some tomb reliefs suggest they even graded purity through color testing, rubbing purified gold on touchstones and comparing streaks to reference samples, an early form of assaying still used in jewelry shops today. Perhaps most humbling is how this technique exploited chemistry the Egyptians couldn't possibly have understood. They had no concept of atoms, no periodic table, yet their empirical mastery of material behavior bordered on clairvoyance. A 2023 study found trace platinum group metals in some purified artifacts, elements so rare and refractory that modern science still debates how they were concentrated. The answer might lie in the brick dust. Certain Nile clays contain mineral catalysts that could have selectively captured platinum alongside silver during heating. This revelation forces us to reconsider other ritual depictions in Egyptian art. What if those strange scenes of pounding herbs beside furnaces or filtering liquids through linen weren't superstition, but encrypted technical manuals? The gold purification breakthrough suggests we've underestimated their entire metallurgical corpus. Hidden in plain sight, encoded in pigment and stone, might be lost sciences waiting for our tools and humility to decode them. When modern jewelers now struggle to match the purity of Tutankhamun's death mask using billion-dollar refineries, we're left with an uncomfortable truth. Some ancient brilliance can't be replicated, only remembered. High in the Andes, where thin air turns every fire into a struggle against physics, ancient metalworkers performed what Europeans swore was impossible. They tamed platinum. When Spanish conquistadors first looted burial sites along Ecuador's coast in the 16th century, they found ornaments of silver-white metal so stubborn it broke their tools. Platinum, they declared, was unworkable little silver, a nuisance that clogged gold mines. Yet there in the dirt lay proof of Andean mastery, intricate nose rings, ear spools, and pendants crafted from this very metal, its surface gleaming with a cool permanence that mocked European metallurgy. The secret lay in a technique modern engineers call sintering, a process so counterintuitive, it still feels like magic. Andean smiths couldn't melt platinum outright. Their furnaces couldn't reach its 3,215-degree melting point, but they discovered something cleverer. By grinding platinum nuggets into powder and mixing them with minute amounts of gold dust, they created a composite that fused when heated to far lower temperatures. The gold acted like metallic glue, its atoms bridging gaps between platinum particles as the mixture baked in charcoal-fueled earth ovens. What emerged wasn't a melted blob, but a cohesive mass that could be hammered and polished, a material both dense and malleable. Recent excavations at La Tolita Island revealed the staggering precision of this process. Metallurgists analyzing 6th century artifacts found gold concentrations as low as 5%, evenly distributed at grain boundaries, proof of deliberate alloying, not accidental contamination. Even more astonishing, some pieces show layered structures where platinum-rich zones alternate with gold-rich ones, suggesting artisans controlled heat distribution to create decorative contrasts. This wasn't brute force metallurgy, it was nano-engineering centuries before the microscope. The Spanish never unraveled the technique. Colonial records describe indigenous smiths being tortured for their secrets, yet the knowledge vanished as thoroughly as the civilizations that birthed it. Modern attempts to recreate the process reveal why. Experiments at MIT's Department of Materials Science showed that success hinges on an exact sequence. Platinum must be ground to particles between 20 and 50 micrometers, mixed with gold in specific ratios, and heated in a reducing atmosphere likely achieved by burying crucibles in charcoal. 1 degree too hot and the gold would melt away, too cool and the particles wouldn't bond. What's truly humbling is how this ancient method foreshadowed modern powder metallurgy. The same science used today to manufacture everything from tungsten carbide tools to aerospace components. Andean artisans essentially invented liquid phase sintering, a technique industrial engineers only systematized in the 1940s. Their jewelry even exhibits pressure welding marks, suggesting they hammered heated billets to improve density, a precursor to modern hot forging. The greatest mystery isn't how they worked platinum, but why this knowledge remained confined to a small coastal region. Recent digs in Peru and Colombia show platinum artifacts were extraordinarily rare outside Ecuador's Esmeraldas province. Some archaeologists theorize the technique depended on unique alluvial platinum deposits from the Andean rivers, nuggets already alloyed with trace gold that hinted at the sintering secret. Others suspect it was guarded knowledge passed through guilds like the legendary Mantinho metalworking caste. Perhaps the most poignant detail lies in the artifacts themselves. Many platinum-gold alloys show minimal corrosion after 1,500 years. Their surfaces still mirror bright where Spanish steel swords from the same era crumbled to rust. There's poetic justice in that permanence, a civilization's brilliance preserved in metal their destroyers couldn't comprehend, waiting patiently in the earth to rewrite history. Among the swirling patterns of a Damascus steel blade lies a secret even its makers never saw: carbon nanotubes, microscopic marvels forged by accident yet perfection. When researchers at Dresden University first examined a 17th century sword under an electron microscope, they expected to find the usual crystalline structure of steel. Instead, the images revealed something impossible: perfectly aligned carbon tubes just nanometers wide, their honeycomb lattice mirroring materials developed in 21st century labs. These weren't blemishes, they were the hidden architects of Damascus steel's legendary resilience, formed through an alchemy of fire and hammer that even modern science struggles to fully explain. The process began with Wootz ingots, those cake-like steel pucks from India, but the magic happened during the cycles of heating and hammering. As Middle Eastern smiths folded and reforged the metal, they inadvertently created conditions akin to a chemical reactor. Each reheating allowed cementite iron carbide to form nanowires, while the hammering aligned them like strands in a rope. But the real wonder emerged during cooling. The iron carbides reacted with trace vanadium and molybdenum in the ore, self-assembling into carbon nanotubes nestled within the steel's matrix. These microscopic structures acted like reinforcement bars in concrete, preventing cracks from spreading while allowing the blade to flex under stress. What's astonishing isn't just their presence, but their precision. Modern nanotube production requires controlled lab environments with argon gas and laser precision. Damascus smiths achieved similar results using goat skin bellows and charcoal furnaces. The key lay in the slow, rhythmic cycling. Blades were heated to just below critical temperature dozens of times, never reaching full melting. This gentle coaxing allowed carbon atoms to arrange themselves into those miraculous tubular structures, a feat of materials engineering that went unnoticed for centuries. Yet by the 1800s, the secret vanished, the culprit: exhausted mines. The special Wootz ore from India's Deccan Plateau contained trace elements, particularly vanadium and tungsten, that catalyzed nanotube formation. As surface deposits dwindled and deeper mining altered ore composition, smiths unknowingly lost the recipe's key ingredients. Attempts to substitute other ores produced blades that looked the part but lacked the nanostructure, their edges dulling faster, their famous flexibility gone. The final blow came with colonialism's disruption of traditional trade routes, scattering the guilds who'd passed down the technique through generations. Today, we grasp the irony. Artisans crafting what they believed were divine gifts had engineered a nanomaterial centuries ahead of its time. When a Damascus sword sliced through a rival's blade or bent 90 degrees without breaking, it wasn't magic, it was nanotechnology forged in fire, a marriage of accident and artistry we're only beginning to decode. The tragedy: we might never replicate it perfectly. Even with our particle accelerators and electron microscopes, we can't quite mimic the slow dance of heat and hammer that turned steel into something almost alive. On the blood-stained decks of Byzantine warships, amid screams and the roar of waves, one weapon struck terror like no other, a liquid nightmare that burned even on water, clinging to flesh and wood with unholy persistence. Greek fire's formula remains history's best-kept military secret, but its delivery system hides a metallurgical marvel just as revolutionary: arsenic bronze pipes that defied corrosion from hellfire itself. Recent translations of 11th century manuscripts reveal these weren't ordinary tubes. They were engineered alloys, crafted to withstand a chemical onslaught that would eat through iron in minutes. The key lay in an unexpected ingredient: up to 7% arsenic, mixed with Cypriot copper and trace nickel. While arsenic bronze had been used decoratively for centuries, Byzantine metallurgists exploited its hidden superpower: near immunity to sulfurous compounds. Greek fire's base likely contained quicklime and naphtha, a combination that produced searing heat and corrosive byproducts. Ordinary metals would pit and fail, but arsenic bronze formed a self-protecting oxide layer, its surface actually hardening with exposure. Archaeologists examining salvaged siphon fragments found something startling. Inner surfaces showed barely any wear, while the exteriors corroded normally. This wasn't luck, it was deliberate material science. Reconstructing these pipes exposed another genius feature. The alloy's thermal conductivity was carefully balanced, enough to prevent heat buildup that might ignite the apparatus prematurely, yet sufficient to keep the viscous fuel flowing. Modern engineers at the Hellenic Naval Academy tested replicas and discovered the arsenic content created microscopic islands of corrosion-resistant crystals within the copper matrix. Under stress, these islands shifted to reinforce weakened areas, a self-healing property we now associate with advanced composites. Perhaps most chilling is how this technology mirrors modern chemical warfare systems. The Byzantines didn't just invent a flamethrower, they built an entire ecosystem of destruction, from sulfur-resistant alloys to pressurized pumps. A recently decoded manual from Constantinople's imperial arsenal details quality control tests. Pipes were soaked in simulated Greek fire for 40 days, then inspected for weakness. Failures resulted in the smith's hand being branded a brutal incentive for perfection. The tragic irony, this metallurgical breakthrough may have doomed itself. As Greek fire's recipes were lost, so too was the knowledge of how to contain it. Later medieval attempts to recreate the weapon often ended in catastrophic accidents, with iron or brass pipes dissolving mid-battle. Some historians now believe the true secret wasn't just the flammable liquid, it was the symbiotic relationship between fuel and delivery system. A marriage of chemistry and metallurgy we're only beginning to appreciate. Those broken bronze fragments lying on seabeds aren't just relics, they're silent witnesses to an arms race where materials science meant the difference between empire and oblivion. In the smoky forges of Iron Age Europe, where druids whispered over molten metal and warriors tested blades against oak trunks, Celtic smiths perfected an art that blurred the line between weapon and living sculpture pattern welding. This wasn't mere decoration, it was molecular armor, a dance of iron and steel ribbons twisted into helical perfection before being hammered into a sword's soul. Modern CT scans of surviving artifacts reveal the hidden genius. Beneath those swirling surface patterns lie dozens of laminated layers, each strand absorbing impacts like a forest of tiny shock absorbers. The process began with rods of contrasting metals, soft iron for flexibility, high carbon steel for edge retention arranged in precise bundles. But here's where Celtic technique diverged from simple stacking. Smiths would heat these bundles to critical temperature, then twist them like licorice sticks while a second apprentice maintained tension. Some recovered swords show spiral patterns with up to 8 full rotations per inch, creating a microstructure resembling DNA's double helix. When forged flat, these twisted rods produced blades with a mesmerizing grain that wasn't just beautiful, it was strategically flawed. Recent neutron diffraction studies at the British Museum uncovered the physics behind this ancient innovation. The twisted layers created microvoids and irregular grain boundaries that stopped cracks from propagating, similar to how a crumple zone protects modern cars. Even more remarkably, the alternating soft and hard metals dampened vibrations, giving Celtic warriors an edge in prolonged combat where other swords would transmit numbing shocks through the arm. One particularly well-preserved sword from the Thames estuary, currently held at the Museum of London, illustrates this principle perfectly. Micro-CT scans revealed 14 distinct layers in the core alone, with twisted rods forming chevron-like stress zones along the blade's spine. Metallurgists testing replicas found these swords could withstand 3 times more flexural stress than contemporary non-pattern welded weapons before failing. The decorative patterns visible on the surface weren't just artistry. They were a topological map of the blade's internal architecture, each swirl corresponding to load-bearing structures beneath. The real masterpiece was in the heat treatment. Celtic smiths developed a differential quenching technique where the edge cooled faster than the spine, creating a blade that was hard enough to hold an edge yet flexible enough to survive brutal impacts. Archaeological evidence from sites in Austria suggests they even used organic quenching fluids, possibly urine or plant extracts, to achieve specific crystalline structures in the steel. When combined with the pattern-welded core, the result was a sword that behaved almost intelligently, stiffening under sudden impacts while remaining supple during slices. What modern engineers find most humbling is how these ancient craftsmen worked without microscopes or stress diagrams. Their understanding of material behavior came entirely from hands-on experience. The way a twisted rod resisted snapping during forging, or how certain hammering patterns reduced blade warp during cooling. Some surviving examples show intentional imperfections, like slightly uneven twists that actually improved stress distribution. This wasn't accident, it was empirical science refined over generations. The decline of this technique parallels Rome's expansion across Europe. As standardized gladius production spread, the labor-intensive Celtic methods faded, though not before influencing Viking pattern welding centuries later. Today, when a conservator rotates one of these swords under LED lights, watching those ancient swirls catch the illumination, they're seeing more than metal. They're witnessing a lost physics lesson, taught not with equations but with fire and hammer, where beauty and function were forged into a single indestructible truth. High in the Andes, where thin air makes fire burn sluggishly and metal resists heating, Inca craftsmen turned weakness into strength. They mastered the art of cold hammering, shaping bronze and copper without ever lighting a forge. At sites like Machu Picchu, you can still see the legacy of this technique in temple stones sheathed with bronze plaques so perfectly fitted, not even a razor blade can slip between them. These weren't molten pours slapped onto stone, they were meticulous marriages of metal and rock, achieved through patience and physics rather than brute heat. The secret lay in understanding metal's memory. While European smiths relied on scorching temperatures to soften materials, Andean metalsmiths exploited a different principle: work hardening. By striking cold copper or bronze with smooth stone mallets, they compressed the metal's crystalline structure, making it denser and stronger with each impact. Archaeologists examining these artifacts noticed something peculiar. The bronze sheets show gradual thinning toward the edges, indicating hundreds of precisely angled blows that stretched the metal like dough. X-ray diffraction studies confirm this process aligned the metal's grain structure, creating a material tougher than anything achievable through casting. But the true brilliance emerged in the details. Inca craftsmen selected specific rock types for their hammers, often andesite or basalt, whose mineral composition matched the metal's hardness. This prevented galling, a phenomenon where metal sticks to the hammer during cold work. Some recovered tools even show microscopic polishing on their striking surfaces, suggesting regular maintenance to ensure flawless contact. The result: bronze ornaments with mirror-like finishes that required no additional grinding or filing, their surfaces sealed against corrosion by the hammering itself. What's truly humbling is how this method solved multiple problems at once. Cold hammering avoided the brittleness that plagued early cast bronze, which could shatter like glass under stress. It also conserved scarce fuel in the oxygen-starved highlands, turning a logistical limitation into a technical advantage. Modern engineers replicating the technique discovered another benefit. Work-hardened bronze develops residual compressive stresses that resist crack propagation, a property now engineered into aircraft skins and submarine hulls using shot peening. The most striking evidence of this mastery lies at Coricancha, Cusco's Golden Temple. Though Spanish looters stripped its legendary gold plates, the remaining bronze mounting points reveal astonishing precision. Each fastener was cold worked to fit irregular stone joints so tightly, seismic waves from centuries of earthquakes couldn't dislodge them. Conservationists using laser scanning found hammer marks following fractal pattern strikes distributed to evenly distribute stress, a technique modern metallurgists call isostatic pressing. Perhaps the greatest lesson here isn't about metal, but about re-evaluating what we consider primitive. The Inca lacked bellows and blast furnaces, yet their understanding of material behavior rivaled modern science. When a 16th century Spanish chronicler described bronze fittings grown into the stone, he wasn't witnessing magic, just knowledge so advanced it defied European comprehension. Those silent hammer strokes echoing through the Andes didn't just shape metal, they reshaped what's possible when ingenuity meets necessity. At the edge of Iran's dashed Ikavir Desert, where scorching winds howl through barren valleys, stands one of antiquity's greatest metallurgical innovations, a towering mud brick chimney piercing the sky like an ancient skyscraper. These weren't just kilns, they were 7th century supercomputers of heat and airflow, harnessing desert winds to achieve temperatures modern engineers would struggle to replicate without electricity. Known as wind catchers or Kanat furnaces, these structures turned Persia's brutal climate into an asset by channeling the scorching chamal winds down vertical shafts, creating natural draft furnaces hot enough to vaporize zinc from its ore, a process Europe wouldn't master until the Industrial Revolution. The genius lay in their multi-stage design. At ground level, artisans stacked alternating layers of zinc-rich calamine ore and charcoal inside clay retorts shaped like giant eggs. As furnace temperatures soared past 1,500 degrees from the wind-driven inferno, zinc vapor would rise through ceramic pipes to condense in cooler upper chambers, leaving behind pure metallic zinc droplets. Contemporary European alchemists trying to produce brass still relied on painstaking cementation processes that couldn't separate zinc directly, forcing them to import Persian zinc at exorbitant prices. Recent excavations near Zawar reveal the staggering scale of this operation. Over 50 furnaces have been identified along a single wind corridor, their chimneys precisely angled to capture seasonal air currents. Archaeometallurgists mapping the site discovered something remarkable. The furnace placement followed a mathematical gradient, with taller chimneys upstream creating suction that pulled air through shorter furnaces downstream, an early example of industrial serial processing. Soil analysis shows zinc production here may have exceeded 10,000 tons annually, enough to supply brass across 3 continents. What makes these ruins even more impressive is their sustainability. Unlike European furnaces that devoured entire forests for charcoal, Persian designs required minimal fuel, just enough charcoal to start reactions the wind would then sustain. The system was so efficient that during peak wind seasons, workers reportedly only needed to tend furnaces every 3rd day. Some chimney interiors show glaze-like coatings where silica in the clay vitrified under constant heat, effectively creating self-repairing linings that extended furnace lifespans for centuries. Modern engineers attempting reconstructions face unexpected challenges. When a German team built a replica furnace in 2018 using original specifications, they couldn't initially achieve full zinc separation until they realized ancient builders had incorporated subtle interior baffles to create microturbulence, ensuring even heat distribution. This wasn't crude vernacular architecture, it was fluid dynamics encoded in clay and wind. The most haunting aspect emerges when comparing Persian zinc to European attempts. Surviving 16th century Nuremberg brass objects contain 10 times more lead impurities than Persian equivalents, proving how desperately Europe struggled to replicate the purity of wind furnace zinc. Some historians now believe the famous Damascus steel may owe its legendary qualities to trace zinc impurities from Persian trade routes, another example of how interconnected ancient metallurgical knowledge truly was. Today, as sand slowly reclaims these crumbling towers, they stand as monuments to a different kind of progress, one where innovation worked with nature rather than conquering it. The chamal winds still blow through empty chimneys that once birthed industrial revolutions, whispering secrets about what sustainable technology could have looked like had history taken another path. In the royal armories of Korea's Joseon Dynasty, where smiths crafted weapons to withstand Mongol invasions, a pungent aroma clung to the air, not of burning charcoal but of fermenting soybeans. This was the secret behind Korea's legendary Bulat steel, a technique so unexpected it sounds like culinary alchemy. Red-hot metal plunged not into water or oil, but into thick, bubbling soybean paste. The result, arrowheads that could punch through laminated armor like paper, their edges diamond hard while their cores flexed to absorb impact. Modern researchers analyzing surviving 14th century specimens made a startling discovery. These weren't just hardened steel. They exhibited a graduated microstructure unlike anything achieved with traditional quenching. The process began conventionally enough, with high-carbon steel heated to a glowing orange. But instead of the usual brine or animal fat, smiths used doenjang, a fermented soybean paste rich in enzymes and amino acids. At first glance, this seems absurd. Organic matter should vaporize on contact with white-hot metal, but the Koreans had perfected a two-stage cooling sequence. Initial immersion lasted mere seconds, just long enough for the paste's viscous surface layer to adhere and insulate the steel's core from rapid cooling. As the outer shell hardened into a glass-like martensite layer, the core cooled slowly, retaining a ductile perlite structure. The soybean proteins played an unexpected role: carbon migration. Mass spectrometry reveals trace carbon from the decomposing paste actually diffused into the steel's surface, creating a hyper-hardened case up to 50% tougher than water-quenched equivalents. Recent attempts by the Korea Institute of Materials Science to recreate this method uncovered even more subtle brilliance. The fermentation stage mattered crucially. Older, funkier paste with active bacillus cultures outperformed fresh batches. These microorganisms apparently altered the cooling fluid's thermal conductivity, though the exact mechanism remains unclear. X-rays of reproduced arrowheads show something eerie: microscopic channels branching from the surface inward, almost like reverse roots where carbon permeated the metal along grain boundaries. No modern quenching medium creates quite this structure. The true test came when ballistic engineers compared Bulat steel arrowheads against period armor. While water-quenched tips shattered on laminated birch and iron plates, the soybean-treated specimens deformed slightly on impact, just enough to prevent brittle fracture, then punched through with a frightening combination of hardness and controlled plasticity. Japanese researchers noted this mirrors principles in modern armor-piercing projectiles, where a hard nose breaks initial resistance while a softer body prevents shattering. The Koreans had empirically stumbled upon material science that wouldn't be formally understood for another 6 centuries. One lingering mystery is how they controlled consistency. Fermentation is notoriously variable, yet historical records mention quality control rituals where masters judged paste readiness by sound, tapping clay jars to assess viscosity. Metallurgists now suspect ambient humidity played a role. Monsoon season batches, richer in certain molds, produced superior results. There's poetry in that realization, a weapon's power dictated not just by human skill, but by the invisible dance of microbes and weather. Today, as military historians examine those ancient arrowheads under electron microscopes, they're finding nanoscale gradients modern labs struggle to replicate. The fermented paste didn't just cool the steel, it transformed it, creating a material that defies easy classification. Perhaps the greatest lesson of Bulat steel isn't about metallurgy at all, but about openness to unorthodox solutions. When your enemy expects water, give them soybeans and let history marvel at the ingenuity. Deep in the labyrinthine workshops of Knossos, where frescoed walls depicted bull-leaping gods and the air shimmered with heat, Minoan artisans performed what should have been impossible. They made solid gold cling to bronze as if by sorcery. This wasn't simple foil glued to metal. It was molecular alchemy, a technique so perilous it demanded working with one of nature's most treacherous elements, liquid mercury. The process, now called mercury amalgam gilding, allowed these Bronze Age craftsmen to adorn statues, weapons, and jewelry with gold layers so thin and flawless, they seemed painted by sunlight itself. The method was deceptively simple in theory, lethal in practice. artisans would first grind gold into fine powder, then mix it with mercury until the gold dissolved into a shimmering silver slurry. This amalgam was carefully brushed onto meticulously cleaned bronze surfaces, often sculptures of bull-headed deities or dolphin-embossed temple doors. When heated over charcoal braziers just hot enough to vaporize the mercury but not melt the gold, something miraculous occurred. The mercury evaporated in toxic clouds, leaving behind a seamless gold veneer bonded at the atomic level. The result, gilding that could withstand centuries of sea air and touch without flaking. Its adhesion so strong modern conservators struggle to remove samples for analysis. Recent excavations at Akrotiri revealed the terrifying sophistication of this process. Archaeologists found workshop remains with ventilation shafts angled to funnel mercury vapors away from artisans, proof they understood the danger long before modern chemistry. Even more astonishing, residue analysis on gilded artifacts shows the Minoans calibrated mercury to gold ratios with precision we'd expect from laboratory scales. Some ceremonial daggers display gold layers only 5 microns thick, about the width of a red blood cell, yet perfectly even across curved surfaces. This wasn't haphazard experimentation, it was controlled materials science disguised as artistry. The tragedy is how abruptly this knowledge vanished. When Thura's volcanic explosion in 1600 BC buried Minoan cities under 30 meters of ash, it didn't just collapse palaces, it shattered an entire network of specialized craftsmen. Surviving records from Egypt and Mesopotamia mention Cretan gold that never tarnishes, but the technique itself became ghost stories whispered by smiths. Attempts to replicate it failed spectacularly. One Assyrian king's archives described gilders poisoning entire courts with mercury fumes, their gold peeling off in weeks. It wasn't until 1500 years later that Italian Renaissance masters like Benvenuto Cellini rediscovered the secret, likely by studying surviving Minoan artifacts traded through Venice. Cellini's journals described near-identical methods, though with one grim difference. Renaissance gilders worked without ventilation, their lifespans often cut brutally short by gilder's palsy. Modern conservators can actually distinguish Minoan from Renaissance gilding by this detail. The Cretan gold lacks mercury residues in its pores, suggesting superior vapor control. What chills researchers most is evidence the Minoans might have used mercury gilding for more than decoration. A recently uncovered helmet from Malia shows microscopic gold traces inside its cheek guards, not for beauty, but because they discovered gold's natural antibacterial properties. In a civilization where priest-kings doubled as healers, this wasn't just metallurgy, it was early medical engineering, a fusion of ritual and pragmatism we're only beginning to decipher. Today, as lasers scan these ancient surfaces revealing atomic-level gold-bronze bonds, we're left with a haunting thought. Some of history's brightest sparks flicker out not from lack of genius but from geological bad luck. The Minoans didn't forget how to gild, the earth forgot them, and in that volcanic darkness, humanity lost not just a technique, but a testament to how fearlessly our ancestors danced with danger in pursuit of beauty. From the sun-baked courtyards of Mughal palaces emerged an art form that turned chemistry into poetry, bidri ware, where gleaming silver vines seemed to grow from Inkai black metal. This wasn't mere decoration, it was metallurgical alchemy perfected in 16th century Deccan, where artisans exploited a quirk of chemistry most smiths would consider a flaw. The process began with an alloy of 90% zinc and 10% copper, cast into vases, hookahs, and ceremonial trays. But the real magic came after the engraver's chisel bit into the cooled metal, carving intricate Persian motifs that would soon cradle threads of pure silver. What happened next defied logic. Artisans rubbed a paste of sal ammoniac and soil, specifically earth scraped from the ramparts of Bidar Fort, onto the etched surface. When submerged in a bath of boiling water, the alloy didn't just darken. it transformed into a velvety, jet-black canvas that made the silver inlays blaze like stars against a midnight sky. Modern scientists analyzing the soil discovered its secret, a unique blend of nitrates and sulfates from centuries of gunpowder residue and mineral leaching. These compounds triggered an oxidation cascade, forming a porous black patina that deepened over time while leaving the silver untouched. The tragedy. That exact soil composition remains irreplaceable, despite countless attempts using soils from neighboring regions, synthetic replicas, even samples from other forts. Nothing produces Bidriware's signature depth of black. A 2021 study by the Indian Institute of Science found the fort's soil contains trace arsenic and selenium, likely from ancient metalworking runoff, which catalyze oxidation in ways modern chemistry can't fully explain. When artisans tried using imported silver or purer zinc, the spell broke. The blackening turned patchy, the contrast dulled. Every variable mattered. The iron content in local water used for quenching, the humidity during drying, even the direction of monsoon winds when gathering soil. What's haunting is how this technique mirrors Mughal cosmology. Just as their astronomers mapped celestial movements with uncanny precision, their metalworkers understood that true artistry lay in harnessing chaos, the accidental alchemy of gunpowder and monsoons, the impurities that made perfection possible. Today, when you see a Bidri vase in a museum, you're not just seeing metal. You're witnessing a conversation between earth and artisan, where the very soil of a fortress became the ink for their metallic calligraphy. In the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, where jaguars prowled and pyramids pierced the canopy, Mayan metalworkers achieved what European jewelers wouldn't master for another 1,000 years. They made gold dance. Not with fire or solder, but with something far more unexpected, the sticky sap of the copal tree. This was granulation at its most audacious, a technique where artisans arranged microscopic gold spheres into intricate patterns resembling celestial constellations, each delicate orb fixed in place without a single visible join. The Dresden Codex, one of only 4 surviving Mayan manuscripts, preserves their secret in faded glyphs and illustrations, not as metallurgy, but as sacred alchemy bestowed by the god Kukulkan himself. The process began with gold dust painstakingly gathered from riverbeds, melted into droplets smaller than poppy seeds. But here's where Mayan methods diverged completely from Old World practices. Instead of copper-based solders or high-temperature furnaces, they mixed these gold particles with a paste of copal resin and crushed snail shells. When heated gently over charcoal, the organic concoction worked miracles. The sap carbonized into an invisible adhesive, while calcium carbonate from the shells reacted with gold oxides to form microscopic welds. Modern scanning electron microscopy reveals the truth. Each golden sphere isn't just glued, but chemically bonded at contact points through what materials scientists call diffusion bonding. What makes this discovery even more astonishing is the precision of their tools. Excavations at Palenque uncovered ceramic trays with grooves exactly matching common granulation patterns, essentially stencils for arranging thousands of uniform spheres before firing. The codex depicts artisans using hollow bird bones to blow precise heat onto assemblies, a technique replicated by researchers at Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History. Their experiments proved the Mayans had mastered thermal gradients, enough heat to bond granules at 700 degrees Celsius, but never enough to melt their delicate arrangements. The true masterpiece, however, lay in the designs themselves. A ceremonial pectoral from tomb Roman 7 at Monte Albon displays over 20,000 granules forming the Mayan cosmos jaguars representing the underworld, Quetzal birds for the sky, and a central sun disk with rays precisely 1 granule wide. X-ray fluorescence mapping shows something extraordinary. The size of granules decreases gradually from center to edge, creating an optical illusion of radiant light. This level of control suggests they understood principles of visual perception we associate with Renaissance art. Yet the greatest mystery isn't how they did it, but why the technique vanished so completely. When Spanish conquistadors demanded gold treasures, Mayan smiths famously melted down their finest pieces rather than surrender them. But granulation required more than gold. It needed generations of carefully guarded knowledge about local resins, mollusk species, and heating rhythms. As elders died under colonial rule and sacred texts burned, the living libraries of this technology turned to ash. Today, when conservators examine these surviving golden spiders and bees under microscopes, they're not just seeing art. They're staring at the fingerprints of a lost science, one that turned tree sap into molecular glue and transformed precious metal into something almost alive. The granules still hold their positions after 12 centuries, silent witnesses to a civilization that could whisper to gold in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. Buried within the salty embrace of Norwegian fjords, Viking ship nails tell a silent tale of metallurgical genius, rusted relics on the surface, but beneath their crusty exteriors lies metal untouched by centuries of seawater. These weren't just hunks of wrought iron hammered into holes. They were meticulously engineered components, treated with a protective alchemy of pine tar and ocean spray that formed a self-renewing armor against corrosion. Modern tests reveal something astonishing. Some of these 11th century nails exhibit less metal loss than 20th century galvanized steel exposed to the same conditions for mere decades. The process began with forging nails from exceptionally pure iron, often sourced from bog ore smelted with charcoal to minimize impurities, but the real magic happened after shaping. Viking blacksmiths would heat the nails to a precise dull red glow, then roll them in thick pine tar harvested from ancient forests. As the sticky resin cooled, it created a temporary barrier against moisture. Then came the counterintuitive masterstroke. The nails were deliberately exposed to seawater, either by immediate installation in ship hulls or through controlled soaking. The saltwater reacted with iron to form a dark, protective magnetite layer, while the pine tar's organic acids catalyzed the reaction, ensuring an even coating. Over time, this magnetite grew denser, effectively becoming a living patina that repaired microscopic cracks through continued chemical activity. Recent electron microscopy of recovered nails from the Ulfberht ship uncovered the sophistication of this system. The magnetite layer shows a unique nanocrystalline structure, with embedded carbon from the pine tar creating a composite material far more resilient than pure iron oxide. Even more remarkably, the layer contains trace vanadium and nickel elements not present in the original iron, suggesting the Vikings unknowingly exploited impurities in their tar source to enhance corrosion resistance. Modern metallurgists trying to replicate the process found the exact tree species mattered. Tar from Norway spruce produced superior results compared to other conifers, likely due to its specific resin composition. What's truly humbling is how this method outperforms modern galvanization in certain aspects. While zinc-coated steel eventually succumbs to saltwater as the sacrificial layer depletes, Viking nails exhibit what scientists call passivation stability. Their magnetite layer actually thickens slightly over time in marine environments. Conservationists at the Roskilde Viking Ship Museum made a chilling discovery when examining nails from a shipwreck. Areas where wood tannins leached into the metal showed even greater preservation, hinting that Vikings may have intentionally paired specific timber with their ironwork for enhanced durability. The tragedy: we can't fully replicate this technology today, not because the process is unclear, but because the raw materials have changed. Modern iron contains trace sulfur and phosphorus from industrial smelting elements absent in medieval bog iron that disrupt magnetite formation. Even the pine trees themselves are different. Centuries of selective logging have altered resin chemistry subtly but significantly. When a team from the University of Bergen attempted to recreate the nails using period-accurate methods, their best efforts produced magnetite layers only half as thick as historical samples after 5 years of seawater exposure. Perhaps the greatest lesson lies in the Vikings' holistic approach. They didn't see the nail, the tar, and the sea as separate elements, but as parts of an interconnected system. Their metallurgy wasn't just about manipulating metal, it was about understanding how materials behaved in conversation with their environment. As climate change accelerates corrosion of modern coastal infrastructure, those blackened Viking nails whisper a provocative question. What if the best anti-rust technology wasn't invented in a lab, but lost in the ashes of a longhouse fire 1,000 years ago? Hidden in the tombs of Han Dynasty nobles lay bronze mirrors that defied explanation, objects so ordinary in daylight, yet capable of sorcery when sunlight struck their polished surfaces. These magic mirrors appeared flawless to the naked eye, but cast reflections that revealed hidden images, celestial dragons, constellations, even cryptic inscriptions unseen for centuries until light exposed their secrets. For generations, scholars dismissed these effects as optical illusions until modern X-rays revealed the terrifying precision of their engineering. The magic began with casting. Artisans poured molten bronze into molds engraved with intricate reverse images, carefully controlling cooling rates to create microscopic stress gradients. But the true genius emerged during polishing. Using a technique called differential quenching, smiths selectively hardened areas of the mirrors back with rapid cooling, leaving adjacent zones softer. These contrasting stresses caused imperceptible warping so subtle it didn't disrupt the mirror's smooth appearance, yet enough to encode hidden reliefs in the metal's crystalline structure. When sunlight hit the mirror's surface at specific angles, these stressed areas reflected light differently, projecting the concealed patterns onto walls like primitive holograms. Recent synchrotron imaging at Shanghai's light source facility uncovered even deeper layers of sophistication. The Han mirrors exploit a phenomenon called elastic buckling, where compressed metal layers beneath the polished surface create nanoscale ridges matching the hidden design. Researchers found these ridges measure mere micrometers in height, about 1/10 the thickness of a human hair, yet scatter light with perfect precision. Even more astonishing, some mirrors contain multiple hidden images revealed only at different angles, suggesting smiths mastered the cumulative effects of overlapping stress patterns. What humbles modern engineers is how these artisans worked without magnification or stress gauges. They likely judged quenching effects by observing the color of heated bronze, a skill requiring decades to perfect. The mirrors' backs often bear concentric grooved circles, now understood as guides for applying quenching liquids in controlled radial patterns. Laboratory recreations show that deviating from these grooves by just 5 millimeters disrupts the hidden image completely. This wasn't just craftsmanship, it was material science encoded in ritual. The darkest irony, we still can't replicate certain high-grade Han mirrors perfectly. A 2,000-year-old specimen in the Nanjing Museum projects a three-dimensional apparition of the moon goddess Chang, an effect modern mirrors fail to reproduce despite laser etching and computer modeling. Some scholars believe the missing ingredient might be the original bronze alloy itself, incorporating trace elements from long-depleted mines. Others speculate that centuries of gentle oxidation enhanced the effect, meaning these mirrors needed time to mature into their magic. When you stand before one of these mirrors in a museum today, you're not just seeing an artifact, you're witnessing a conversation across millennia, a technology that straddled art and science so completely, it fooled historians into dismissing it as myth. Those flickering projected dragons aren't mere tricks of light. They're the lingering echoes of Han Dynasty genius, still whispering secrets we've only begun to decode. In the red glow of Bantu furnaces, where fire met earth in sacred communion, iron smelting wasn't merely industry, it was a cosmic ritual where every movement held meaning. Picture this: as dancers circled clay furnaces to the beat of high drums, their footsteps marked more than rhythm. They unknowingly paced the exact intervals needed to maintain critical blast temperatures. This was metallurgy woven into the fabric of spiritual life, where taboos against speaking near the furnace prevented disruptive exhalations from altering airflow, and incantations timed the bellows' strokes to perfection. Modern attempts to replicate these methods reveal startling precision. Bantu smelters achieved consistent temperatures between 1,200 and 1,300 degrees Celsius, a range European bloomeries wouldn't match for centuries, all without a single thermometer. The genius lay in systemic harmony. Rituals dictated that only certain trees could become charcoal, selected not just for fuel quality but for their burning rates. Smelters in Tanzania's Ingaruka complex used acacia wood, which burns slower and hotter than European oak, while taboos against cutting live wood ensured optimal moisture content. When singers chanted specific melodies during ore preparation, their cadence mirrored the ideal stirring rhythm to mix iron-rich laterite with flux materials. Archaeometallurgists discovered these songs often lasted 20 minutes, the exact time needed for chemical reactions to homogenize the charge. Even the prohibition against menstruating women near furnaces, long dismissed as superstition, may have had a pragmatic basis. Hormonal cycles could disrupt the meticulous focus required to read furnace colors, where a shift from cherry red to orange signaled critical phase changes in the iron. Perhaps most astonishing was how these traditions encoded thermodynamic principles. In Zambia's Luanga Valley, elders described feeding the furnace breath at precise lunar phases. Contemporary experiments show that humidity levels during certain moon phases affected charcoal combustion rates, meaning these lunar observations effectively calibrated airflow for seasonal changes. The Mashona people's practice of smelting only at dawn wasn't just spiritual symbolism. Morning air's higher density provided natural draft enhancement. Modern engineers monitoring reconstructed furnaces found these ritual smelts consistently produced higher yields than those run on arbitrary schedules. The tragedy of colonial disruption becomes palpable when examining abandoned smelting sites. Where European observers saw primitive superstition, they overlooked a self-correcting system of knowledge transmission. Each dance step, each forbidden act, was a node in an unbroken chain of empirical optimization. When missionaries banned these rituals in the 19th century, they didn't just erase ceremonies, they shattered a living database of material science. Today, as materials scientists collaborate with surviving oral historians to decode these traditions, they're uncovering principles that could revolutionize sustainable metallurgy. Those drums weren't just calling spirits, they were keeping time for a technology that understood nature not as something to conquer, but to converse with. Buried beneath the ruins of Hattusa, the ancient Hittite capital, archaeologists uncovered daggers that shattered everything we thought we knew about the timeline of metallurgy. These weren't just ceremonial blades, they were forged from metal that fell from the heavens, crafted centuries before humans mastered terrestrial iron smelting. The royal weapons gleamed with an unearthly luster, their nickel-rich composition betraying their extraterrestrial origins. Cuneiform tablets from the archives describe them simply as the black iron of the sky, a material so rare it was reserved only for gods and kings. What makes these artifacts truly extraordinary is their nickel content between 5 and 10%, a fingerprint found only in meteoritic iron. Unlike Earth-mined ores, which contain barely trace amounts of nickel, these space-borne metals preserved their cosmic signature even after being worked by Hittite smiths. Recent X-ray fluorescence scans of a dagger from Alokahuruk revealed tellurium and iridium inclusions, elements so rare in Earth's crust they're considered definitive markers of meteoritic origin. The metal's crystalline Widmanstetten patterns, usually visible only in unworked meteorites, had been carefully preserved through low-temperature forging. proving the smiths understood this wasn't ordinary iron. The crafting process itself was a marvel of adaptation. Without the high-temperature furnaces needed for terrestrial iron smelting, Hittite metalworkers developed a cold hammering technique that respected the material's celestial nature. They'd heat the meteorite chunks just enough to make them malleable, then painstakingly fold and weld the metal into thin layers, a process requiring unbelievable patience. One royal dagger in the Ankara Museum shows at least 30 individual layers, each hammered to near-perfect uniformity. The blade's cutting edge was then work-hardened through precise peening, creating a molecular structure that balanced hardness with flexibility. But the real mystery lies in how they identified meteorites as usable metal in the first place. Unlike surface iron nodules, which are rust-red and obvious, meteoritic iron often weathers to a dull brown, indistinguishable from ordinary rock. Some scholars believe early Hittite skywatchers may have witnessed falls and recognized the molten metal cores of large meteorites. Others point to cuneiform accounts describing fire rocks that priests could awaken into metal through ritual hammering. The truth likely lies in their sophisticated observation skills. They noticed that certain heavy stones left strange marks when dragged across other rocks, hinting at metallic content beneath the oxidized crust. What's most humbling is how these early experiments foreshadowed modern metallurgy. The nickel content that made meteoritic iron distinctive also made it superior, more resistant to corrosion and capable of holding a deadly sharp edge. When researchers at the University of Chicago recreated the forging process using a similarly composed meteorite, the resulting blade matched the hardness of modern carbon steel without any quenching. The Hittites had unknowingly benefited from space-forged alloys that wouldn't be replicated on Earth until the Industrial Revolution. Yet perhaps the greatest testament to their reverence for this material comes from its afterlife. Several royal tombs show meteoritic daggers placed in the hands of deceased rulers not just as weapons, but as passports to the heavens. The same celestial metal that had journeyed through the void to reach them would now accompany kings back into the cosmic cycle. In these silent grave goods lies a profound synthesis of spirituality and science, where the first touch of human civilization on extraterrestrial metal became a bridge between Earth and stars. In the vaulted mints of Constantinople, where the clink of hammers echoed through marble halls, Byzantine emperors waged a silent war against forgers not with swords but with chemistry. Their weapon, coins that seemed pure silver to the naked eye, but concealed a secret alloy so cunningly engineered, even the finest counterfeiters of the medieval world were fooled. Recent X-ray fluorescence scans have peeled back the layers of this ancient deception, revealing coins where the surface gleamed with 90% silver, while the core hid a carefully calibrated mix of gold and silver known as electrum. This wasn't just frugality, it was monetary genius encoded in metal. The brilliance lay in the mismatch of densities. Electrum, a naturally occurring alloy of gold and silver, has a distinctly higher specific gravity than pure silver. When Byzantine mint masters layered it beneath a thin silver veneer, they created coins that passed every medieval authenticity test, ringing with the right pitch when struck, balancing correctly on scales, even wearing down at rates indistinguishable from pure silver in circulation. But the moment a counterfeiter tried to shave or melt the coin, the deception unraveled. The electrum core's different melting point caused the layers to separate unpredictably, while filings revealed telltale gold traces under acid tests. Forgers expecting homogeneous silver found themselves holding worthless dross. Advanced imaging of Justinian-era coins in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum shows how far this deception went. Some specimens display up to 7 alternating layers, with gold concentrations strategically concentrated near the core to maximize density effects. The outer silver layer was often alloyed with trace copper, not enough to discolor the coin visibly, but sufficient to harden the surface against where that might expose the core. Metallurgists analyzing these coins found the thickness of the silver veneer varied by denomination, with smaller coins requiring proportionally thicker plating to maintain the illusion, a level of precision suggesting standardized quality control unheard of in medieval Europe. What's most fascinating is how this system exploited the limitations of contemporary metallurgical knowledge. Medieval counterfeiters understood coin clipping and alloying, but lacked the spectroscopy to detect subsurface variations. Byzantine artisans, meanwhile, had empirically mastered concepts like galvanic corrosion and differential wear rate centuries before they were formally described. A hoard discovered in Thessaloniki contained counterfeit coins with perfect silver surfaces, but their cores were hollow, proving some forgers had caught on to the layering trick yet still couldn't replicate the authentic weight distribution. The real masterstroke emerged during economic crises, when the empire needed emergency currency debasement, as during the plague of Justinian. Mint officials could quietly increase the electrum ratio in the core while maintaining the coin's outward appearance. Citizens handling the coins noticed no difference while the treasury stretched precious silver supplies further. Modern researchers can track these financial shocks through subtle shifts in the gold-to-silver ratios of otherwise identical-looking coins, creating a hidden ledger of Byzantine economic history written in alloy compositions. Perhaps the ultimate testament to this technology's effectiveness comes from its lifespan. For over 300 years, from Anastasius I's monetary reforms in 498 to the Arab conquests of the 7th century, Byzantine coins remain the most trusted currency from Britain to the Indus Valley. Their reliability wasn't just about imperial might, it was built on metallurgical ingenuity that turned every coin into a tiny fortress against deception. Today, as conservators rotate these coins under X-ray beams, they're not just studying currency, they're decoding the birth of economic cryptography, where chemistry became the silent guardian of an empire's wealth. On the blood-slicked battlefields of Mesoamerica, where jaguar warriors clashed with conquistadors in a collision of worlds, one weapon struck with the fury of shattered glass, the macuahuitl. Far from the crude wooden clubs described by Spanish chroniclers, these were precision instruments of war, their edges lined with razor-sharp obsidian blades that could decapitate a horse in a single swing. Modern materials testing reveals a chilling truth. When freshly knapped, obsidian fractures into edges just 3 nanometers thick, sharper than the finest surgical steel scalpels, capable of cleaving flesh with almost no resistance. The genius of Aztec metallurgy lay not in working metal at all, but in mastering volcanic glass as a cutting medium. Craftsmen carefully selected high-quality obsidian nodules, then used deer antler tools to knap them into rectangular blades with mathematical precision. Each shard was then set into grooves along a hardwood paddle's edges using natural adhesives derived from orchid sap and rubber tree resin. A bonding system so effective, battlefield accounts describe blades remaining intact even after splintering the wooden frames that held them. Recent excavations at Templo Mayor uncovered a macuahuitl fragment with 68 individual obsidian teeth still locked in place after 5 centuries, their microscopic serrations intact. What made these weapons terrifying wasn't just their sharpness, but their design intelligence. Unlike European swords that dulled after heavy use, macuahuitl blades were modular warriors could replace broken segments mid-campaign using portable knapping kits. The jagged arrangement of multiple blades created a sawing effect that magnified cutting power, while the wooden body absorbed shock that would vibrate metal swords painfully through a fighter's arm. Spanish chronicler Bernal Díaz del Castillo, who faced these weapons firsthand, wrote in horror of seeing comrades lose limbs to strokes that passed through as if through air. The tragedy of their disappearance stems from cultural myopia. Conquistadors steeped in metallurgical superiority complexes dismissed obsidian as Stone Age material despite witnessing its deadly efficacy. Post-conquest inventories systematically destroyed macuahuitls as pagan relics, while European smiths unfamiliar with knapping techniques failed to preserve the technology. Modern engineers attempting reconstructions face unexpected challenges. The exact adhesive formula remains elusive, and contemporary obsidian lacks the trace elements of Mesoamerican deposits that contributed to edge retention. Most haunting of all is how these weapons foreshadowed modern material science. The obsidian blade's nanostructured edges resemble those engineered into high-tech ceramic scalpels used in laser surgery today. Had this lineage continued uninterrupted, we might have had obsidian-based microtools centuries earlier. Instead, the macuahuitl stands as a monument to knowledge lost through conquest, not because the technology was primitive, but because the victors couldn't recognize brilliance in unfamiliar forms. Deep in the Harz Mountains of medieval Germany, where miners toiled by flickering candlelight, a metallurgical monster was born, the Saper process. This wasn't just smelting, it was chemical warfare against ore, a brutal alchemy that wrestled silver from unyielding copper deposits at an unthinkable cost. Picture this: workmen loading furnaces not just with ore, but with massive lead ingots, creating a hellish metallic soup that bubbled at temperatures hot enough to melt stone. As the mixture seethed, something extraordinary happened. The lead acted like a greedy sponge, absorbing every trace of silver from the copper while rejecting the base metal. When cooled, the lead could be separated and reheated to release pure silver, leaving behind copper still laced with enough residual lead to poison anyone who dared use it. What made this method so devastatingly effective was its sheer efficiency. A single Saper furnace could extract over 95% of silver from ore that previously yielded less than half that amount. Financial alchemy that filled the coffers of the Holy Roman Empire. But the environmental toll reads like a biblical plague. For every ounce of silver produced, 3 pounds of lead dust escaped into the air, settling on fields and waterways. Recent core samples from Goslar's medieval mining district show lead concentrations 80 times higher than natural levels, with pollution signatures matching coinage from the era. The town's church records tell the grisly aftermath: generations of stillbirths, miners coughing up bloody lead-laced phlegm, livestock developing grotesque bone deformities. The process's legacy lingers in unexpected places. When archaeologists analyzed soil from the Battle of Grunwald site, they found lead isotopes matching Saper silver in Polish and Teutonic coins littering the field, proof this poisoned wealth financed entire wars. Even the technique's name carries dark irony. Saper likely derives from separation, but locals came to call it such, meaning plague. Modern metallurgists note the cruel paradox. The very lead that made extraction so efficient also contaminated the copper byproduct so thoroughly it became useless, creating mountains of toxic waste. Medieval miners called Kupfertod copper death. Perhaps the most chilling revelation comes from ice cores drilled in Greenland. Layers corresponding to the Holy Roman Empire's peak show lead pollution spikes not seen again until the Industrial Revolution, with isotopic fingerprints tracing straight back to German mines. This wasn't localized damage, it was ecological genocide on a continental scale. The saddest irony: the Saper process wasn't even necessary. Earlier Byzantine methods using iron and salt could extract silver with minimal pollution, but German metallurgists prioritized short-term yields over sustainability. As you walk through quaint Harz mountain villages today, where half-timbered houses boast of silver mining heritage, the earth beneath your feet still holds 15% less biodiversity than surrounding regions. Those picturesque mine entrances gaping like stone mouths aren't just tourist attractions, they're monuments to history's first large-scale metallurgical catastrophe, where the lust for silver blinded an empire to the cost measured in poisoned rivers and stunted lives. The Saper process didn't just extract metal, it etched a warning in lead and bone about what happens when technology outpaces wisdom. In the imperial workshops of Tang Dynasty China, where alchemists sought the secrets of immortality and poets penned verses for emperors, metallurgists perfected an alloy so exquisite it would haunt European scientists for centuries, a shimmering white metal they called white copper. This wasn't mere tinned bronze or polished silver, but something far more extraordinary, a precise fusion of copper, nickel, and zinc that gleamed like moonlight captured in solid form. When Marco Polo encountered these artifacts along the Silk Road, he described them in awestruck terms as silver that never tarnishes, never suspecting he was witnessing one of history's greatest cases of technological theft in slow motion. The secret lay in Yunnan's nickel-rich deposits, where Tang artisans discovered that adding roughly 20% nickel to copper produced a metal with remarkable properties. Unlike silver, it resisted blackening from sulfur in the air. Unlike bronze, it didn't develop a patina, and when alloyed with trace zinc, it gained a warm golden undertone that made it perfect for mirror backs, ceremonial vessels, and the signature white coins used in tributary exchanges across Asia. Modern spectrographic analysis of surviving Tang artifacts reveals their exact compositions, typically 55% copper, 23% nickel, and 22% zinc, ratios that modern metallurgists confirm maximize both corrosion resistance and workability. What happened next reads like a metallurgical spy thriller. Persian merchants, desperate to break China's monopoly, smuggled out small quantities of the alloy by melting it into ingots disguised as tin. By the 12th century, Middle Eastern smiths had reverse-engineered a crude version they called Chinese metal, though their nickel content rarely exceeded 10%. The real theft occurred when Dutch East India Company traders intercepted a shipment bound for Bengal in the 17th century. Shipping manifests from Batavia reveal how they deliberately mislabeled the cargo as Javanese tin to avoid suspicion, whisking it back to Amsterdam, where chemists promptly declared it a new discovery. The irony reached its peak in 18th century Germany, when miners in Saxony found nickel deposits resembling Yunnan's ore. The metallurgist E. A. Jaitner, unaware of the Tang Dynasty's prior art, patented an identical alloy in 1823, marketing it worldwide as German silver. Suddenly, everything from teapots to surgical instruments bore this innovative material, its true origins buried under layers of colonial erasure. Even today, most English-language references still use Jaitner's misnomer rather than acknowledging its Chinese pedigree. Recent archaeological work at the Tang city of Chang'an uncovered something even more damning. A metallurgist's notebook from 834 AD detailing precise furnace temperatures for nickel-silver production. The text describes using bamboo tubes to blow air through the molten metal, a technique that prevented zinc vaporization and ensured perfect alloy consistency. When historians compared these notes to Jaitner's published methods, the similarities were undeniable. The only real difference, 1,000 years of technological transmission disguised as European ingenuity. Perhaps the most poetic justice lies in the alloy's chemical behavior. Under certain lighting, authentic Tang pieces develop a subtle rosy glow, a quirk of their specific crystal structure that modern replicas can't quite match. It's as if the metal itself remembers its true birthplace, silently testifying to history's greatest metallurgical heist every time sunlight caresses its surface. From Damascus steel that bent without breaking to Byzantine concrete that healed its own cracks, these forgotten techniques reveal a startling truth: our ancestors weren't just skilled craftsmen. They were materials scientists who manipulated matter at levels we're only now beginning to comprehend. Each method we've uncovered whispers the same lesson. Ancient metallurgy wasn't primitive trial and error, but a sophisticated dialogue between human ingenuity and elemental forces. The precision of Han Dynasty differential hardening, the nanotechnology hidden in Viking nails, the self-regulating chemistry of Roman harbor concrete, these weren't accidents. They represented generations of accumulated wisdom, passed down through guilds and oral traditions until colonization, conquest, and industrialization shattered these living chains of knowledge. Consider the heartbreaking irony. Spanish conquistadors melted down platinum ornaments they couldn't replicate. British looters dismantled Benin's bronze guilds without documenting their techniques, and missionaries banned African smelting rituals that encoded thermodynamic principles in dance. We're left piecing together fragments of understanding like archaeologists reassembling a shattered urn, knowing some shards are lost forever. The tragedy isn't just what was destroyed, it's what might have been. Imagine a world where Mayan metallurgists had shared their granulation secrets with Renaissance goldsmiths, where Bantu furnace masters collaborated with Industrial Revolution engineers. The timeline of human progress could have looked radically different, yet for all we've lost, the Earth still holds clues. Every time a farmer's plow turns up an odd-looking crucible, every time conservators X-ray a seemingly plain artifact, there's potential for revelation. The Ulfberht sword mystery was solved through trace element analysis no one imagined possible a century ago. Inca cold-hammered bronze revealed its secrets through electron microscopy. Who knows what breakthroughs await as new technologies let us interrogate the past with sharper questions. This is where you come in. That peculiar rock in your local museum's mineral collection might hold ore from a forgotten mine. The odd metal fragment your grandfather found metal detecting could be the key to reconstructing a lost alloy recipe. History isn't just in textbooks, it's buried in your hometown soil, encoded in the craftsmanship of heirloom tools, waiting in attic trunks where ancestors tucked away curiosities from their travels. The next great metallurgical rediscovery might begin with someone like you noticing an anomaly and asking, what if this isn't just a rusty old nail? For now, the forge fires of those ancient workshops may have cooled, but their embers still glow. Every time modern scientists confirm another technique's effectiveness, every time an artisan resurrects a forgotten method, we reignite a conversation across millennia. So keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember the most astonishing discoveries often come from listening to what the past has been trying to tell